It's Saturday, July 29th, 2023. I just came back. Lewis took me into Manhattan to go to a thrift store to look for clothing. So we went into some area called Chelsea to some Buffalo Exchange. Um, and the streets of Manhattan are so filthy dirty in that area. There's a lot of graffiti. And as I was walking, the smell of crack, whatever that chemical exchange is that smells like 1980s crack or whatever year that came out, it it's what's coming up from the subway grates today. As I walk down the streets, it like the streets, you couldn't get away from the smell. It was so potent, and it was just like a cloud that hung. I mean, again, this is what the heat signature looks like in the area. If they I hear they're talking about silver linings, I'm like, growing up I thought a silver lining was something good, but I'm looking at the violent light, and I no longer think silver is like necessarily a good thing. um so there's a couple of different headlines I want to go over. Again, I mentioned yesterday something about presidential palace, based on Biden's trip that he just took. I mean, this is what's on our Federal Reserve System, and it says America, and this is the face of America, in our designated territory. And this is what's coming through on, I heard, um, a foreign rep on the television mentioned, on the approved or whatever they scrub before they put it to the public. I heard them mention that something called an airship. So this is my airship that they're bringing in here. I don't understand why they're allowing non-presidential palace spokespersons to speak on behalf of America or any part of the federal system on broadcast or on the actual television with that level of sorcery. I thought that was reserved only for the federal children, um, of the monetary class, but here we are. So they put up this is a movie, but it's almost like a paraverse or a whatever. It's, first of all, it's spelled J-U, in Jules, en français, les joues, but it talks about apples, it talks about UFOs, and it's coming out August 11th. I just thought that it was really quite interesting how they did that here, and they're also talking about UFOs. They just had the UFO hearing at the House level in the Congress, for which I think I'm incredibly grateful. The Gersh gentleman, he was wearing an orange band on his wristwatch. The breathable particulate in this climate right now in New York for global warming and like these global terrorists, that have taken over equipment. I don't know how. Um, we're up to level orange on dangerous breathable components in the air in New York. I can't get away from it. I'm having metabolic issues. But anyway, that's my health update at the moment.
A UFO crashed in my backyard.
Did you just say UFO?
What is that?
Remember the spaceship? This is the little man who came out of it.
You think we can call him Jules? He's no Jules, he's more of a Gary.
He said he was buying apples for an alien.
I'm worried.
I'm okay.
You know what?
I live in the Big Apple, so buying apples for a little alien, and the alien, it looks blue. I'm just saying.
What happens to these guys when they fall to earth?
I went yesterday to purchase college they had an exhibition and an admissions thing going on. I found Culture Shock up there with a big mural. First time I had ever been on the campus, um, up at Purchase, New York.
Rated PG-13.
Extreme heat, dangerous humidity. Stay with us for continuing coverage.
Now it goes straight into the, I can go outside the door. I can take video of it, that it's actually real. It's actually really happening. But there's a scientist on now that talks about vibrations that come off of something that's, again, I have been kept in a series of rooms away from wherever I needed to be, and away from the people that I needed to be around, and led down other things. But this idea of vibrations, and then I also saw in the headlines that they have this thing called hazing on Ryan Field. They're having a big Northwestern hazing thing going on, and they use the color purple there. So I don't know if that's just a front for something else that's going on. It's possible. But I got the message there because, again, when I was in college level, or I was supposed to go to college level, would have been a great time for someone to have let. And I also saw Jeffrey Epstein. Again, he looks very, what presented itself as Mossad in the 1990s to me in this area. I don't know if it was Jeffrey Epstein. I don't remember the gentleman's name who came, but it has that very like distinct look of that rep, and I don't know where that rep comes from. It just, the one that came to visit me, I was the babysitter. It was an artwork deal. Gave me a card, and it had this word Mossad on it, and then it had on, which I had never heard before, he gave me the warning, and that was it. Never heard from or saw him ever again.
Welcome back to CBS Saturday Morning. We begin this half hour with more on the scorching week across vast stretches of the U.S. This summer's broken records include 30 days straight in Phoenix with temperatures reaching over 110. The all-time hottest night ever in Death Valley, dropping only to 116 degrees at midnight. The longest stretch above 60 degrees in Portland, Maine. And the highest ocean temperature ever recorded off South Florida's coast. So this morning we're talking to Jeff Goodell about his new book, The Heat Will Kill You First. Goodell has been writing about climate for the last 2 decades. So much has changed.
There is no relief in sight from the brutal heat.
In Phoenix,
in California,
in Portland, Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland have unhealthy air conditions.
In Houston, roads buckled. Even by South Florida standards, this heat is excessive.
Heat is vibration.
Heat is vibration. So, if I touch this rock and it's been sitting out in the sun and I can feel the heat from the rock coming into my fingertips, and what's happening there is that rock, the molecules in that rock are vibrating faster than the molecules in my hand. That's transferring that vibration to my fingertips.
Jeff Goodell's book, The Heat Will Kill You First, shares frightening stories of those who've died from extreme heat, but also explains why people keep seeking it. We glamorize beach destinations all the time. We have hot lists.
Totally.
Hot people. People generally think warm is good.
Yeah.
Why are they wrong?
Well, they're not. I mean, warm, people like warm. Warm is one thing. Hot is something different.
Extreme heat has been defined as an average annual temperature above 85 degrees, the point at which our bodies, well-calibrated heat machines, start to get thrown off.
A steady temperature is essential to the functioning of our bodies in every way. And as we get into these hotter environments, hotter conditions.
Now, I don't know who had my astrological records when I was little, But whoever the first gymnastics team was, where I was the really young, like 5-year-old, and they were all in their teens at that point, they gave me a trophy. They wanted to make sure I had it, and it had on it hot stuff. And that was the first I didn't know what a trophy was. I didn't know what competition was. And I didn't go to compete with them when they were off doing their competitions. But they handed me that, and they suggested I went to ballet lessons, which I did. I followed their directions. But again, and it's just in that headline story, this Northwestern hazing with everything else that I've gone through.
Who still immediately recoil when they hear the terms global warming or climate change. Some have suggested just saying pollution. Maybe none of it is complete.
None of those phrases captures the urgency and the scale of what's changing. This is not just about, plastic bottles on the side of the road or something like that. This is a existential threat to our civilization as we know it.
And at the moment, I'm trapped in New York. At least it feels like a trapping in New York, where I don't have my health the way that a normal 44-year-old should. I don't know how to get back into balance with my health. There's no social network here in New York. There's no job function to be part of and to participate in. They have literally, I said to Lewis the other day, I said, you know what it really feels like? I said, it really feels like that there were stages where I needed to hit certain key markers, and I feel like the windows and the doors were shut. So I couldn't even make it out if I wanted to. Like when I look back on exactly how it took place, the timing was off for me. And I just feel like at an astrological timing and programming mechanic, I feel like they pulled me off and out of the synchronicity that I needed to be in and forced whatever this issue is. And I don't know who they are, but a lot of things have been recorded on my behalf up until now. I just don't know who holds those records.
For those who deny climate change is taking place or that the world is getting hotter, you wrote this book, but do you try to engage when you talk to those people, or do you just try to do your work?
Just as I don't want to have a conversation with you about is gravity real or not, there are certain fundamentals that I take as a baseline for our conversations. The people I want to reach are the people who understand the basics, who understand that yes, we burn fossil fuels, those fossil fuels put CO2 into the atmosphere, the CO2 traps heat, and our world is getting hotter. Those are very basic, fundamental science things. I want to communicate with people who don't understand the risks and exactly the scope and scale of what we're talking about.
Goodell says as we continue looking for ways to stop pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we have an added advantage. 20 years ago, clean.
Now, E150 shows Cuomo talking about, he's doing this new series, Crime in America. I'm going to go from the E150, where he's investigating that, to his E149 with an interview he did with Vivek, which after the Khan at the FTC and the Patel at the State Department, and now Vivek, and then there's some costumed version of a U.S. representative, but it looked like, again, for layman's terms, in civilians who have been locked in a city and doesn't know where her tribe went, to chase it up her own chain of command without relying on potential threats to my national security, because I don't know who this person is. But he has this label in my airspace that says he's U.S. But now, if well, New York is my home territory by Federal Reserve and Presidential Palace. New York is my Northeast, is where I arrived and is where I represent. But it's this U.S. of America. And now he's so if I'm home team, he would be something away team. But yet he's in New York City. And for me, that represents out of bounds. Like, because something's foul in New York and he's here, but he represents the away team for I don't know what or whom. And I don't know where my home team reps are. So, and he doesn't even look federally reserved. So it's confusing for me in like panic mode of like there's strangers in the house and I see like Father Biden down in Washington, D.C., very busy all day long, but like who's following around? I mean, he can't be everywhere. There has to be more than just Biden, which is why like the calls come in from New York and like, I don't know if you saw this on the television, but in New York, they're saying there's a stranger in the U.S., New York area. Like, how do I know if he's real? Like, I mean, seriously.
Trump is on indictment watch again. This time, we're waiting to see if the January 6 riots investigation develops charges against Mr. Trump and his associates. So tonight, Trump is going to be in public since we heard about the new charges added in the Mar-a-Lago investigation. And he's going to be alongside all 12 of his rivals. The question is, how are they going to address it with him? And what does it mean in terms of his strategy? We have Trump's spokesperson with us. Then, Trump isn't the only one having a bad week. It may be worse, but he's not the only one having a bad one. News Nation's political editor Chris Steyerwalt says Biden and DeSantis took their own hits. And why am I like this? Because Monday night, we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get after it on the topic of crime. News Nation is as much a movement as it is a media company. And we believe that we have to come together to talk more about what matters most to the most people in this country. And we're going to start, we've already started, if you think about it, the way we did the Bobby Jr. Town Hall, how much we cover crime here, the cross-section that we give to different voices that you're not used to hearing, certainly on cable television in the same place. And this town hall is the next step, okay? We're calling it Crime in America. We're having watch parties in major cities across the country, Chicago, Fort Worth in Texas, and of course in New York City. And we're going to have people asking questions like we do every night, but we're going to have a cross-section of what's working and where across the country and what isn't and why, okay? So I also want to put some perspective on crime now versus how it was, what's changed for better and worse. And nobody has been covering crime longer or better than Geraldo Rivera.
Now he's going to go into that. I'm going to segue back. There's a place in the world I don't know anything about. I just know it exists on my globe on a different continent. So they're putting this in that something happened overnight in a place called Niger, where they had an overthrow of a government. Really frightens me. And then there's the state rep that I do recognize, which is Anthony Blinken, and he is saying that he's concerned with things going on as well. So I'm going to pause this for a second and I'm going to reference that, and then I'm going to go back to the Cuomo where I listened to this Vivek character, and he's like, I mean, it sounds like he's espousing anarchy, and I'm concerned.
Witness soldiers that led a military coup in Niger have installed a new head of state.
Our economic and security partnership with Niger, which is significant, is in clear jeopardy.
In Western.
Now, things that seriously concern me, and I don't know where to turn. When I went down to the Intrepid, the day that Tia Frio and I took my son, we took the train. And we walked a long way. We didn't know where we were going. But in order to get down there on foot, we had to walk past something called Uganda House. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a geo-global reference. I'm like, how do they have a place? I mean, and again, if like, for lack of a better term, like the word smuggler or the word trafficker comes up with what I see going on, and not necessarily just them, but then I see this, because this other place I went by today said Operation Falafel, and I'm like, that's a whole nother territory on the global scale. And I'm just like, there's some, and then there were like not just one Indian restaurant, because that would be an exotic cuisine. It's New York, it's chic, it's like, it's something really high end for the residents and the way Manhattan used to be portrayed. And now there's like, just, it looks like a whole neighborhood opened up, competing Indian restaurants. And I'm just like, now there's just nothing special about it. It's just a lot of competition, but what else is going on in that particular block vicinity? I don't even want to stop the car and get out, I'll be honest. Now here's what's happening. Again, this is News Nation. This is the E149. And this part of his interview, which I think should go for analysis personally. I'm in this presidential palace for Federation and for United States of America. And it's coming through. My feet are in the residence. I'm stuck between my capture of this and where it's piped in some holographic universe, like between where I'm getting and then where I'm going to put this back for like a full loop of my commentary on this, only because I have considerations and concerns, and I don't know where to voice them properly to keep myself safe, but also in like presidential palace responsibility in flagging for the correct help.
I want to bring in Vivek Ramaswamy, 37 years old. He's running in the GOP nomination process. He has been moving up in the polls, okay? He just qualified for the first debate. Let's talk about why and what he's offering and his take on what is besetting the former president. It's good to see you again. I told you I would keep having you come back as it goes along and as warranted, and you have momentum. Now, I'm
going to pause for a second because his name is very unusual. And I saw on CBS at 10 a.m. on this date where I am in 2023, they have up this alleged U.S. Surgeon General who also goes by the name of Vivek. But again, I don't have a direct chain of command here in New York that I know how to call and figure out how to even speak on the topic. So I'm just winging it at the moment, trying to do the best that I can. Again, when I went through school, there was no internet. There was no internet whatsoever. As I was growing up, it had not been brought out public. And there was like no curriculum. Okay, so this is CBS 2 News. And this is where they played it.
Benchmarks of well-being.
Well-being of America's young people is now a top concern for the U.S. Surgeon General, who warned in June of a youth mental health crisis.
It now threatens the foundation for health and well-being for millions of our children.
For Penelope, who warned in June of a youth mental health crisis.
It now threatens the foundation for health and well-being.
So this is where they use his name. See, it's spelled there exactly the same and that is him, and this is his whatever. I don't know how to read that either. But I'm going to go because now I'm going to go back to Cuomo, who has the same name. And I'm like, I don't know, are they buying spokespeople inside my presidential palace airspace? Because that's concerning. And if that's falling back on, like if this causes World War III, I want to be treated like I should be in this wasn't me and it happened and I don't know how to capture it and get it to the correct commanding officer for on the behalf of myself and my children to protect us from whatever this might bring in espousals. So I'm going to go back to what Vivek's saying because it's the same name and I don't know what territory either one of them are from. I don't necessarily think that they like I don't have no way of finding out, but I'm listening to what Vivek's saying, and I'm like, now if that's the spokesperson, because if he's limited in what he can say, and he's hiring a spokesperson to speak on his behalf, that concerns me, especially knowing what's coming out of this man's mouth on this Cuomo show. So I'm going to pause this for a second. So E139, it's a 727 in the years 2023.
Now, I want to go back to something that I asked you the first time I had, because I really liked the second part of the answer, where it's about philosophy and identity of what it is to be American and what values you want to put back on the table. I liked it. The first part, I felt you ran past too first. I said, as a 37-year-old, you have a unique burden for all your success, and it is prodigious, to let people know I'm ready. And you said no one should have the hubris to think that they're ready for this job. The American people want to know that you think that you're ready. So at 30...
Okay. This is what an American president looks like historically. And I have not been asked whether he's allowed to even be considered an American, let alone an American president. I haven't been polled. I haven't been asked. I haven't been able to vote for that. But yet he's in presidential airspace, presidential palace airspace on the television coming into New York where I am, and I am able to receive the message. And they're claiming, allegedly, he's GOP looking for a candidate spot, but yet I'm GOD for that purpose. They labeled me that here in elementary school.
37, they're going to be where he hasn't done anything like this before. He doesn't have that kind of experience in government or abroad. What do you say to people with those concerns? Wildly impressed with your success and your charisma, but concerned that this is a hard first job.
Look, it's not my first job. That's the first thing I would say. I've built multi-billion-dollar businesses. I've created work for thousands of people. I've also developed medicines that have helped save people's lives. I've interfaced with the regulatory state. I understand how to lead people. I actually think my status as an outsider is going to be an asset in
So he admits he's an outsider, but then he calls himself an American. And I'm like, and this is the other problem that I have with the sports leagues, is they're just allowing and sponsoring these children to represent America, which is confusing to the outside states that are not part of the United States of America. But if they cluster them in nations, or if they cluster them in states, or whatever word they use, when I look at Niger, they look Nigerian. If I look at France, they look French. When I look at the American teams, it's like, whose children are these? Like, I have to go to the only currency we have and go, where's the rest of the, like, where's the presidential palace children here? Why are they not being fostered and developed into this, like, thoroughbred team? Why is it so confusing, this identity of America, when the presidential palace already put out who we are?
In leading this nation forward, both when it comes to foreign policy and, yes, when it comes to domestic policy here, Chris, at home as well. And I think my combination is unique. It's part of what called me into this race. I do think it takes an outsider, somebody who has been a CEO, somebody who has actually led people, including honestly generating wealth in the private sector. Trump did some of that, but to combine that with also somebody who has a deep understanding of the Constitution and the laws of this country. And so, Chris, when it comes down to shutting...
But now, he didn't have ancestry in these lands. He was not part of the Constitution originally, the signed part with the forefathers. So I'm not quite sure how he has been, like, I haven't even gotten extensive of enough studies. So he's surpassed me in his studies in the America.
Shutting down the administrative state, when it comes to declaring independence from communist China, when it comes to exactly how to grow the economy, and maybe most importantly, how to reach and inspire young people to be proud of this country again. I think I am the single candidate in either party who has the best understanding of how to actually do it. And I think if you look at this race, we have also offered unprecedented detail on exactly how we would go about accomplishing it. And so that's my case for saying I'm ready for the job. We're actually running to lead this nation to a national revival. I think about my destination is not November 2024. That is the start line. January 2033, when I leave office, that's the true destination.
Are you moving up in the polls because you are the Trumpiest of the field except for Trump, and you're using his ideas, some of which would be criticized as extreme ideas, and that's why you're getting the resonance that you're getting, because you're basically the echo of Donald Trump for his supporters?
I think the reason I'm moving up strikingly in the polls this quickly, this early, is because I am speaking the truth without apology. I am untethered. I am the only candidate, you could argue except for Trump, but certainly in this race, who is untethered from the super PAC class. We have a lot of super PAC puppets in the race. I actually think we should have less influence of mega money on politics in both parties, but including the Republican Party. And I'm untethered to actually speak the truth without apology. My sense, Chris, is that voters have a good sixth sense for whether they're being fed some poll-tested slogan or someone's actual convictions. That's what I think is actually lifting us up. I also think I'm the only candidate of anybody in this race who is actually leading us to something. The rest of the field, they're running from something. I'm leading us to something, to our vision of what it means to be an American. I think people are hungry for that. We lack a national identity today. I'm the only candidate who's speaking to how we revive that national identity and offer tangible solutions for actually delivering it. So that's what I think is lifting us up.
Square the straight talk and wanting to get back to putting first principles first with not believing in the pursuit of justice against the former president. You've been a dogged defender of his. You don't like that he's been indicted. You said you'd pardon him even before we even know the merits of the cases before him. How do you reconcile being a straight-talking guy who wants to get back to the basics of justice and governance when you don't want that process to apply to the former president? Is that just a popularity play with his base?
No, it's not, Chris. I respectfully disagree with that characterization. This is based on first principles for me. I did wait to read both indictments, and on those two indictments, the facts as applied to the law, I believe, are deeply politicized for reasons that I've argued in detail, including legal arguments on the pages of the Wall Street Journal. But more importantly, I think this sets an awful precedent in our country. I do not want to see the United States of America become some banana republic where the party in power gets a precedent now of using police force to indict its political opponents in the middle of an election. I think that takes us down a dangerous road as a country. That's not a road I want to see us go down. I'm worried, Chris. I think we are on our way to a potential national divorce. I don't want to head further in that direction. So my question is, does this take us further in the direction of a national divorce or not? If it does, I want...
No, national divorce is that where nuclear weapons get put in. I'm just curious because that's like as if the shaking and the light source, the radiological light source, and then the health that I'm suffering under. Like, I walked down Manhattan Street today and I had my video camera out, and you can see the shakiness as I'm walking because my muscles, my sarcomeres or my myomeres are not working in the correct metabolic fashion that I was born with. There is so many dioxins and toxic carcinogens in the air, and I can't get medical professional to actually help me to get healthy. And it is so frustrating knowing that, I mean, I'm already suffering under lack of medical care, and I'm in this monetary system that is still in current circulation.
I want to go the other way towards a national revival.
I don't disagree, but this is part of the trick of the job. And I in no way mean to condescend. I am very impressed with how you've been moving in the polls and how you're conducting yourself. And as I said in the beginning when I first had you on, you will have a platform here as long as you're, making moves in this race. You deserve to be part of the conversation. And to the extent that we make that choice, we're making it tonight. However, you see the superseding indictment that they put out today on the classified documents?
I saw it briefly reported shortly before coming on this show.
When you look at it, you don't have to be a Harvard guy to see that.
I don't even know where those documents came out. I have no idea where they publish things. I have no idea how to access things. I have no contacts to somebody who is like a law official that could say, hey, Nick, here's where we are at. This is what's going on. Here's what you need to know. Or did you see anything today that I could document on your behalf? Or would you like, here's how to write directly to us. Here's where to send it so it actually gets to like up the correct chain of command to where they need to hear from you. There's none of that. Okay, here's where at like 39, I rewound it because I know I heard him say something about shutting down the administrative state. And I'm like, now how is that different? Why are they letting him say that on the American airs in this airspace when this is the presidential palace approval of genetics? Why is this not being arrested and charged immediately, especially with things that they just put on air about Niger having an overthrow of their government or their president to somebody else? It's confusing.
First job. That's the first thing I would say. I've built multi-billion-dollar businesses. I've created work for thousands of people. I've also developed medicines that have helped save people's lives. I've interfaced with the regulatory state. I understand how to lead people. I actually think my status as an outsider is going to be an asset in leading this nation forward, both when it comes to foreign policy and, yes, when it comes to domestic policy here, Chris, at home as well. And I think my combination is unique. It's part of what called me into this race. I do think it takes an outsider, somebody who has been a CEO, somebody who has actually led people, including honestly generating wealth in the private sector. Trump did some of that, but to combine that with also somebody who has a deep understanding of the Constitution and the laws of this country. And so, Chris, when it comes down to shutting down the administrative state, when it comes to declaring independence from communist China,
that's a major red flag for me. Shutting down the administrative state. Why does he want to shut down my administrative state in the United States of America? And I'm in New York, so that's the state for which I'm in. Why this sudden desire for this area? Why doesn't he just focus on wherever they originated from? It's just, I don't understand where this lust for whatever is coming from. Now, we had this weather person at CBS 2 News. I don't know how they hired her, but it was somebody by the name of Elise Finch. She died. And now this morning, usually John does Saturday mornings, and Linda and I enjoy watching him. But this morning, this person is on. And it's on, again, It's in my presidential palace airspace. I don't understand how. I don't understand why. And I don't understand why it's at Federal Trade Commission, why it's at the state level, why it's now trying to run for GOP, why they have somebody sitting in New York at some council that I'm not even invited to, calling itself a U.S. Surgeon General. This is the presidential palace look. Wouldn't that indicate that something else is afoot or fraudulent? I mean, how does one, like, call that level of, like, confirmation that we're in trouble in the residence to somewhere in the galaxy, wherever it is that presidential palace genetic actually originates from? If I'm stuck in New York in the house and there's foreign whatever airships going on, how do you call that into your designated representative? I also saw that Biden put up yesterday some executive order about sexual harassment and overriding to an independent counsel. Now, is that still within the genetic sequencing for which you are? If the original person in a whatever, I mean, like, I don't even know how that works. And I don't know anyone, I don't know who to even call that into. I mean, there's been very little contact or help given or even instruction given. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station. Oh, you know what they did? They're talking about MTA because there's something corrupt going on. I'm going to mention that before I go off. Something's going on with the New York City crane. The buildings person is there saying there's a big hydraulic fire.
Rest assured that we will be looking at those plans that the contractor submits to us before that crane is put in place.
The city is still investigating the cause of the crane fire, but sources tell us it may have started from a hydraulic fluid leak. Campaign 2024 now former...
Now, here's a report came out today with the MTA and Empire Center. Apparently there's such a thing. I had no idea.
New report finds you don't have to be a top transit official to take home a big paycheck from the MTA.
More than 1,100 workers doubled their salaries because of overtime, costing the agency nearly $1.3 billion. CBS 2's political reporter Marcia Kramer has the story.
It's a really bad deal for taxpayers.
Ken Girardin on a new study by the Empire Center showing the expanding number of members of the MTA's six-figure salary club. 1,131 doubled their salaries last year. 566 collected more than $100,000 in overtime, many tripling their pay.
When we see people tripling their pay, it raises some really big questions about how time and resources are being allocated at the MTA.
And what's more, many take home almost as much as their bosses. Some do get even more. Harry Dobson, a Metro North structures supervisor, boosted his regular pay of just over $113,000 to over $345,000.
Now, when I worked at the bank, I didn't even make as much as this regular pay. And I had securities licenses.
At $54 an hour, that meant he worked 4,255 hours of overtime. Kendall Ward, an assistant station master on the Long Island Railroad, boosted his base salary of nearly $109,000 to over $335,000. At $52 an hour, that was 4,353 hours of overtime. And MTA Police Lieutenant Robert Rao increased his base salary of $168,000 to over $386,000. Since his hourly salary was $78, that meant he logged 2,722 hours of overtime. He took home about $15,000 less than MTA Jano Lieber, but $136,000 more than Governor Hochul and $128,000 more than Mayor Adams.
I'd say anyone who...
And that's pretty much the whole administration that's going on at the same time. And I'll use the pattern. Where I am, it's this and this. I'm going to pause this and grab the globe. And again, on the globe, it's that continent. So it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken.